Welcome to another episode of Branching Out with Sierra. Today we are going to focus on the heart of resilience, but before we do, I wanted to take a moment to thank you so much for your support during the first episode. I received so many messages, phone calls, feedback, and even heard from a student that I taught 10 years ago. He was in second grade and now he is a high school senior. So lots of great support. I appreciate it. I appreciate the feedback too. Those of you that are comfortable enough to tell me the things that I can do to improve, that is very helpful to me. I told you that this is completely outside of my comfort zone, so I am looking for those of you that have more interest in podcasts, listen to them all the time, ways that I can keep developing this skill. Well, in last week's episode, we focused on self-awareness, and I do give a branching out challenge each time. So I do want to take a minute to just remind you, if you haven't listened to that episode, we were talking about the ways that we can further develop ourselves as leaders by looking inward first and do what I said was take a leadership selfie, which is really just unpacking who you are, what your values are, what your strengths, opportunities for growth, everything that makes you who you are. Knowing that makes you a better leader. So if you did participate in last week's challenge and take some time to reflect on who you are, your purpose, your strengths, your core values, and so on, I would love to hear from you. If you didn't catch that episode, be sure to go back and take a listen. So without further ado, we are going to dig into today's episode. I'm going to talk a little bit about my roller coaster ride of life and why bouncing back stronger is actually within everyone's reach. I really want to help you understand today the opportunity that we have to turn obstacles into future opportunities for growth. And I want to share some really personal stories with you today. I did say in the first episode that I will be vulnerable in these shows and share a little bit more about myself and my story as we go. And I will be opening up about some things today that are extremely personal that I wouldn't normally share with an audience, but I feel that you will see the value in connecting my personal experience to the topic of resilience. So let's start by talking about what resilience is in the first place. So if you look at the definition of resilience, there are tons out there. I did pull one for today's episode for the purposes of this conversation. And resilience is defined as the ability to recover from setbacks, adapt well to change, and keep going in the face of adversity. So 3 components there: recovering from setbacks, adapting well to change, and keep going in the face of adversity. And there are 3 key components that are listed within that. That is your emotional resilience, your physical resilience, mental, and I will actually add spiritual as well. And I thought it was interesting when I looked that up because it connects back to what I was talking about the wheel of life and how I break health into 4 categories: mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual health. And resilience really deals with all 4 of those. And then thinking about how resilience shows up in leadership. So obviously in previous episodes, these past 2 episodes, I have been focused on how we can incorporate leadership into everyday life. And I shared that I think it starts with looking at yourself first and leading yourself effectively before looking at how you can lead others. And so resilience in leadership really helps us to see how we can handle stress more effectively, but not just bounce back, but bounce forward from those situations, those obstacles that we run into, and model for others the ways in which we can approach these setbacks in the future. So in my story today, I am going to share 5 different setbacks that I felt I have experienced thus far in my life. And the interesting part is it's just 5 of very many. These are 5 that popped into my head first as I was reflecting on what stories I thought would be of value to you. And so I am going to talk today about the loss of my grandparents. I'm going to talk about my battle with chronic Lyme disease, going through divorce, having setbacks with my financial security in relation to medical bills and ongoing health complications, and finally, challenges as a business owner. So lots loaded in there today. And the way that I'm going to format this so it kind of makes sense and you can think about how it applies to your life is I'm going to jump into strategies that you can use to develop resilience in yourself. And as I discuss each of those strategies, I'm going to share how that was implemented during my time of difficulty so that you can kind of see what it looks like in real life. If I would give just one piece of advice when it comes to approaching a setback or a challenge, I often think about what is within my control. So what about this situation that I find myself in is something that is within my control? And I always find three things immediately that I can control. I can control my attitude towards the situation. I can control who I choose to surround myself with in order to make it through that difficult time. And I can choose how I'm going to take care of myself during that time. Three things: my attitude towards it, who I'm going to surround myself with, and how I'm going to take care of myself. And so we're going to start with strategy one, and that is my attitude towards it has a lot to do with my thinking. We're going to talk about resilient thinking. And my first suggestion here is to reframe an obstacle as an opportunity. And I know many of you have probably heard this before, and you say, okay, well, when you're in the moment, how can you see it as an opportunity? There's no way that I can be in the situation I'm in and find any positive in it. It is a low point for you. It's very difficult to see the positive. And the interesting thing is you might not see it yet. But thinking about the fact that this could be an opportunity for growth and learning, I find to be very helpful. So asking yourself, in the situation that I find myself in right now, what can I learn from this? And I think that it also helps you to look ahead and see this as a temporary setback and know that if we focus on a long-term perspective, it's a little less overwhelming in the moment. So talking about what can I learn from this, I want to give you a couple of examples of how I applied that. And I could really apply this to every single example that I shared earlier, those 5 examples. I'm going to start with the loss of my grandfather. So I lost my grandfather when I was 12 years old, and my grandfather was my very best friend. He is the one I enjoyed spending the most time with. He bought me my first guitar and took me to guitar lessons. I used to sing for him, play for him. I mentioned him in my first episode. He was the one I would sit in the living room and give spelling tests to and play school. He was my absolute best friend. And that was my first experience of a really big loss in my life. And I did not know how I could go on after losing my best friend. I could not wrap my head around it. And the interesting thing is, every time that I went to my grandparents' house, my grandmother was always there taking care of me, making me meals. Absolutely amazing. But my focus was 100% on my grandfather at all times. I was his shadow. And so once he passed, I knew that my grandmother and I both felt this significant loss and that she really needed me then. And so what I chose to do is I continued to spend the same amount of time there, except I was now focused on, for the first time, building a really strong relationship with my grandmother. And I learned so much about her that I didn't know before. I suddenly thought she was just so much cooler. I know she was always that way, but I suddenly saw so many traits in her that I loved. And I feel like through my relationship with my grandfather and then taking that energy and putting it towards spending a lot of time getting to know my grandmother for many years beyond Pop-Pop's passing, I learned a lot of character traits that I really see as effective leadership traits now. I feel that they both made me who I am today. My other set of grandparents did as well. Obviously, my parents did as well. But the reason I really focus on this situation is because, like I said, that loss was very significant to a 12-year-old in feeling like they lost their person. So obviously, through that situation, I learned in my mind how to take an opportunity like that to support someone else in their time of difficulty. And we found comfort in one another. I learned a lot of values at that time. Another situation that has allowed me to reframe an obstacle as an opportunity and use it to learn is my chronic Lyme disease. And I mentioned that also in a previous episode. And I think when I talked about it, I focused more on the fact that I was on bed rest and at a low point and I had to pivot. And that's when I moved into leadership development as a whole rather than focusing purely on educational leadership. And so when I think of how Lyme was actually an opportunity for me, I deepened my understanding of leadership at that time. I was able to 100% focus on learning this skill set. As I said, I was on bed rest. I was living and breathing, being on my computer, taking lessons, learning, reading, just kind of immersing myself in leadership development and finally understanding it in a completely different way. So it definitely led to an opportunity for learning. But also looking at that low point in my life, that low point in my health, there was an unexpected opportunity that arose out of that hardship, which was starting a business and having a completely different impact than I was having before. If I were to look at the impact I was having as a classroom teacher at the time versus what I'm doing now, it's a completely different situation. But I feel like it's a valuable service that I've really decided to provide, and I can see the changes that people are making in their lives and focusing on their growth and their leadership capacity. So I feel like a really great opportunity came out of what was the hardest moment of my life, which is I don't know what my future is going to be. I don't know what my health is going to look like. And then finally, another obstacle that turned into an opportunity. This is kind of an interesting story because most people see my business, okay, I'm 4 years in. She looks like she's doing okay. She's fine, right? There were some really, really low points in my business. And when I mean really low points, I'm talking some serious financial struggle of how am I going to get from my office in Winchester back to Pennsylvania tonight because I don't know if I have enough gas money. So, being able to run a business and also use that business to cover all of my personal needs as well, and then paying off old debt related to my medical expenses was a lot of weight. And I had mentioned in a previous episode that, just because I think there's value in sharing leadership development, training, and opportunities doing coaching doesn't mean everybody sees the value. And it took me a while to figure out if there was even space for me to do this. But the reason I bring up my financial difficulty with the business is because that actually became an opportunity for me to strengthen my faith. And I remember this very specific time where I had literally no money left in my bank account. There was nothing in my savings account. There was nothing in my personal account. I had nothing left. And the next day, a big bill was going to auto withdraw from my account. And that bill was going to be $475. And I was sick over it. I didn't know what I was going to do. I was upset. I was crying. And I reached out to my mom. And my mom and I love playing bingo. It's our thing. Ever since Mamaw passed away, we've tried to continue to do it in her memory. We used to play with her and go to the fire halls. I chose to call my mom and tell her what was going on. And she knew I was down in the dumps, and she said, you know what, let's go play bingo tonight. And I thought when we entered the bingo hall, you know what, we have never won the jackpot before. The jackpot was $1,000. We've never won. Wonder what it's like to win. If Mom and I were to win the jackpot tonight, like I said, it was $1,000. Mom and I always have an agreement where we split the winnings. Whatever we walk away with, we split. And I thought, if we would win tonight, then I would walk away with $500. So that bill tomorrow I could pay and still have a few bucks left over. It is all going to be okay. I really have to focus on tonight. I'm going to win. I was praying like crazy. I thought, this is literally my last opportunity. You know, it's the evening before this payment's going through. It's my last opportunity to get the money. And fast forward to the end of the night, we hadn't been winning. And I kind of want to cry even talking about it. We won the jackpot that night, and I was blown away. My mom and I sat and bawled like babies, and we kind of laughed at ourselves too, because people that go and play bingo, it's like, it's nothing to them to win the jackpot. They're so used to winnings. They're spending money left and right. And I knew I was sitting in that room with absolutely no money to my name. And I had to figure something out. And if that could be impactful for anyone in that room, it was me. And so we sat there and cried, and people were looking at us like we were crazy. Like, what is up with these two women? We take the money. We go out to the car. We continue to cry. I am just blown away, and I feel this relief. And I knew it strengthened my faith immediately that so many times I had reached rock bottom with my finances trying to run this business. And every single time that I had nothing left, the next day something would come in and it would give me hope again. And this was another one of those opportunities. So we get to Mom's house. I was going to spend the night with her that night. And Mom said, well, we should probably count the money. Like, we don't even know if we got all the money. We should probably count it. And so we sit down on the floor, and she's counting it out. And if you can imagine, like, if you're dealing cards, she's, laying a bill in front of me, laying a bill in front of her, back and forth, counting it out, splitting it equally as we had discussed, 500, 500. And when she counted out the final $10, they were all in ones. And she said, 995, 996, 997, 998, 999. And then she paused and she took all of the money, and I'm going to cry. She took all of the money and pushed it across to me and said, $999 for you and one for me. Okay. So that moment allowed me to not only pay that bill the next day, but get ahead to the point where I felt like it was all going to be okay. So what came out of that? I strengthened my faith. I knew that those times where I hit, in my mind, rock bottom, that if I prayed and I believed, that things would happen the way that they were supposed to. And I also was able to see the amount of support that I have around me, which I'm going to talk about a strategy related to that in a few minutes here. So obviously an emotional story for me. All of these are emotional stories, and I thought I would keep it together for all 5 of them, but obviously not on that one. My early days of business, you think this is early days? No, this was several years into my business. That was during year 3 of my business. So financial struggle has been a challenge, is a challenge for many business owners, and I am so glad that I have been able to turn those obstacles into opportunities. So the next strategy I want to talk about is setting realistic expectations in regard to resilient thinking. I tend to not have realistic expectations for myself. I'm not going to lie. I set the bar pretty high for myself and those around me. And I have to really think about what is within reason for myself. I always push a little harder. And the time that I had to be extra careful about the expectations was during my Lyme disease. So you take someone who is Miss Independent, very active, love running, love exercising. I had been doing 2-a-days, working out, felt strong, everything was great. And then you put me on bed rest with muscle atrophy. I can't take care of myself, questionable future. I had to be realistic in my expectations of myself. And that was really hard for me to do at the time. So my recommendation for this one is really thinking about what is within reason for me based on what's in front of me right now. What is that first next step that I can take so that I am not feeling overwhelmed by the situation as a whole? Another thing I've really had to work at when it comes to resilient thinking is remembering I'm not defined by the situation I find myself in. I'm going to say that again. Remembering I'm not defined by the situation I find myself in. And there are two specific times where that was really hard for me. Number one, I had always had great credit. I had always been, very careful about making sure that any debt that I took on, I was paying off. I hated debt. I said I'd never have it. And my medical expenses related to my Lyme disease led to a lot of credit card debt. And I reached a point where I knew there was no way I would ever get out from under that debt if I didn't consolidate and really work to start settling it with these individual companies. I actually used a debt consolidation company and was happy to finally have a plan in place to work towards that. And it was a 4-year program. 2 years into the program, I decided, I should really sit down and analyze numbers and figure out how much I've put into this, how much of it has gone, to actual debt. I just suddenly became curious about what are their administrative fees, what's going on with it. And when I looked, I had put $25,000 towards my debt, and only $5,000 of it had gone to actual debt. The rest was taken by the company in fees. And most people will immediately say, well, why didn't you sue them? It's just not how I function. It's not how I think. I don't have time for that. Instead, I learn a lesson and I move on. But this was the first time that I had a low credit score. And I truly felt defined by that. I felt like I was walking around with a big sticker on my shirt that had my credit score written on it, and that people were going to know and they were going to judge me for it. Because what happens when you use a company like that is they tell you to stop making all payments because they're going to work on settling. Well, I had never missed a payment before. That's why my credit was so strong. And they're telling me I have to. And so I did. And so that was really, really hard for me to accept. By the way, left that company, moved on, and I have been using Hope Restored Credit Repair. If you have not heard of that, out of Winchester, Virginia, please, please, please take the time to meet those folks. Very, very helpful. And finally feel like I'm getting a handle on things. So I had to remember that I was not defined by the situation I found myself in. I just needed to figure out how to get to the other side of it and lay out a clear plan. The other situation I found myself in, divorce is something that I never thought I would do. You imagine this perfect fairy tale, right? I felt like, I was marrying my high school sweetheart. I'm going to start a family. I'm going to have a fairy tale ending. I've got a plan for everything. And the moment that did not work out as planned, I felt like everybody was judging me. I felt like I couldn't go in the church because what were people going to think and feel about me? I felt that some of my family members, even my grandmother, wasn't going to see me the same way. No one would truly understand what had happened behind the scenes that had led to that. and that wasn't something that I wanted to talk about. So I was just going to have to accept whatever judgment came with it. But I had to remind myself every single day, I am not defined by my divorce. So a couple of examples there for you as well. So we've talked about reframing obstacles as opportunities. We've talked about setting realistic expectations for yourself, and then remembering you're not defined by the situation you find yourself in. Another skill that I want to talk about are the problem-solving skills associated with building resilience. And that really, for me, just means breaking the problem in front of me into manageable parts and then coming up with a solution, right? As long as you have a solution in mind, you're taking action. I only let myself feel sorry for myself for a very short period of time. I do let myself feel sorry for myself. I do. So I'll give you an example. Just 2 weeks ago, I felt like I was receiving all of the worst results to tests and all of these health complications all at once. Everything was going awry with my health. I couldn't help but think, if my health goes downhill, I'm not going to be able to run my business. I'm not going to have a source of income. I'm going to lose everything. My mind does go to worst case scenario. And I allow it for a short period of time, and then I turn it off because that's not getting me anywhere. It doesn't change my situation. What I need to do instead is look at how I can approach one thing at a time. So that rather than looking at the 8 health complications that I had going on at the time, I looked at the calendar, I set up the necessary appointments, and I am only focused on the one right in front of me right now. So appointment tomorrow, I am focused on that one. Once I get through that one, then I can think about the next one. That has been really helpful in just feeling like I can really take this on, chiseling away at it. I'm getting the information I need to be able to make decisions. The other way that I have broken down problems into manageable chunks is literally paying off debt. I went into 2024 with the intention of aggressively paying off all of my debt by the end of the year. And the way in which I have been approaching that is I literally took the sum, what is the total amount of debt that I need to pay off? I divided it by the number of months in the year, and I told myself I needed to generate enough revenue to pay all of my bills, plus be able to knock out all of that debt 1 month at a time. So I have successfully done so thus far. It is now June. I have done that for January through May successfully. Hopefully, I will generate enough revenue this month to also knock it out. But it's been easier for me just because I only have to see it a month at a time. I don't have to worry about where the money for next month's debts are coming from. I just worry about what's right in front of me. So I hope that these strategies can connect with you in some way. Maybe you realize that you've been doing some of this, but resilient thinking is a great strategy. It's crucial in being able to overcome obstacles. So all of that was actually within strategy 1. Those are all resilient thinking possibilities. Now I want to move into, and I won't spend as much time here, but leaning into your support system. That is a great strategy for resilience. Really being aware of who's around you and how they can be helpful. I always wanted to approach everything alone. I wanted to feel like I had the ability to independently overcome obstacles, and I reached several moments in my life where I felt I was given no choice but to finally ask for help. And I think that within this strategy, asking for help is crucial. I think we should normalize seeking support when it is needed, and reach out to those folks that you need in your corner. So, for example, when I was at a really big low when I was going through my divorce, I was after a 12-year relationship. I find myself single for the first time since I was basically a child, and I just didn't know if I could do it alone. And I remember sitting on the couch and telling Mom, like, I just need help. I don't know how I'm going to get to the other side of this. I am so broken. It was hard to ask for help. It was hard to say, I actually think I need to see a therapist. I need to talk to someone to be able to get through this. But I found that I came out stronger because of it. If I had not gone through that experience, I don't think I would have had the clarity I have now as to what I need in my relationships. I don't think I would have the view on the independence that I think I require. I now know I need the people around me. And the same thing happened with my Lyme disease. So I really needed people to drive me around to my doctor appointments. I needed people to bring me food in bed. I had people sending me gifts. My schools were wonderful during that time. I say schools because I ended up on bed rest 2 different times, once while I was working for Fairfax County, Virginia, and once when I was working for Winchester, Virginia. And both times, everybody was reaching out. The students were sending me cards. It was just amazing, the amount of people that came together to help me feel like I could get through this. So beyond asking for help, just immersing yourself in a community of people, whether those people have the same needs as you and you are able to talk through what you're going through and feel like you're not the only one that's experienced this before. So for example, I like surrounding myself with people who actually know what it's like to have chronic Lyme disease. It is very difficult to explain what it feels like. It's difficult to explain what it's like to wake up in the morning and just immediately know your body is off and you might not be able to take on the day the way that you would like to. It's wonderful to have people in your life that you can reach out to and say, hey, I'm having a tough day. This is what's going on. And they truly understand because they either are currently experiencing it as well or have experienced it in the past. So getting yourself into a community of folks that are like-minded or facing similar situations, I think is helpful. But then also community involvement outside of your situation. Going back to you're not defined by it. I'm not defined by my Lyme disease. I'm not going to play victim because of that, because it happened to me. I used to have that attitude. I will not anymore. Instead, what if I put myself into a community of people who have different strengths and skills, and I'm learning from them and I'm growing and they're surrounding me with positivity, and it allows me a distraction from my situation. It allows me to focus on some things outside of what difficulties I have, because when things quiet down, they quiet down at night, right? You're sitting alone, you're reflecting on your day. Sometimes that's when it's hardest. Is when you're alone and you have time to just think and be by yourself. So having other folks in your life to lean into, I think, is very important. And then finally, within this category of leaning into your support system, effectively communicating your needs. So it's not just about asking for help, but how can you explain how you're feeling constructively? How can you communicate your needs so that others understand the amount of maybe support you need by them giving you space? It doesn't always mean when you're asking for support that people have to come to you. Sometimes that's that you need a boundary at the time and you need some time on your own to think and you know, whether it's Bible study and reading scripture, whatever it may be, if you need more of that to feel comfortable communicating that to others. So all of those fit into that strategy of leaning into your support system. And then finally, strategy 3 for today, strengthening your resilience through self-care. Because if you neglect your self-care, it can completely deplete your personal resources that are absolutely essential for you to bounce back stronger. And what I'm saying when it comes to self-care is the physical activity component, regular exercise, knowing that that's going to reduce stress, it's going to improve your mood. It is going to contribute to overall resilience. And I think that was something that made Lyme extra difficult for me because I had always been a runner. And my outlet would have been to go for a run to be able to clear my mind. And that was taken away. So my physical activity was reduced and I had to lean into self-care in other ways. And so physical activity isn't always possible depending on your situation. There was a time when I couldn't do a lot. So my physical activity was literally lifting weights, just sitting in a bed, weights in with my arms. I mean, you can even do like cans, right? It doesn't matter as long as you're moving your body. And then nutrition. Nutrition is so important. Healthy diet does impact your mental and physical well-being. You have to think about what you're putting into your body, and that is the fuel for you to get better, the fuel for you to overcome these obstacles. I have tendencies to get really wrapped up with the situation in front of me and want to take action and then skip meals. So I have to work really hard at forcing myself to eat 3 meals a day and not get lost in my work or whatever I'm approaching at the time. And so I actually had to set a goal for myself this year to eat 3 meals a day every day, and I've had to work hard at that. So balance nutrition as a part of your self-care, adequate rest. Obviously, ideally we want 8 to 9 hours of sleep every night. I know that there's a lot of folks that have trouble, turning it off at the end of the day. You might be scrolling the endless scroll on your cell phone and not be able to fall asleep. But trying to schedule your bedtime at a time that allows you 8 to 9 hours. And if you know it takes you an hour to fall asleep, go to bed an hour earlier. Rest is crucial. And then finally, in self-care, any sort of mindfulness practices. I know I mentioned that in the self-awareness episode too. Just being able to, sit down, be clear in your thoughts, be able to be calm and feel like, whether it's through meditation, which I don't typically do. Some people do breathing techniques. Some people do yoga. For me, my mindfulness actually takes place when I have my quiet moments in the morning before anyone in the household wakes up, and I have my morning routine. That is my best time for mindfulness practices, and that is just sitting in silence and being alone with my thoughts. I also reflect a lot while I'm driving, and that can be helpful. So I have covered 3 strategies today in being able to be more resilient. And I told you that, for me, it's what can I control in this situation, and it's my attitude towards it. So that's the resilient thinking. It is who I surround myself with. So thinking about pouring into, leaning into your support system when you need it, and then how you take care of yourself. So that self-care piece. So based on those 3 areas that I have discussed, I do want to present you with a branching out challenge. And so this challenge is pretty obvious what I want you to do. I just want you to reflect on some personal resilience stories of your own. What are some obstacles that you have faced in your past where at the time they just felt insurmountable? But now that you have moved past them and you're looking back, what was the learning opportunity that you found in those? What growth opportunity? Is there a skill set that came out of it? Or did it place you in a position to meet the person that you would spend the rest of your life with? Or land a career that you had no idea that you even would be interested in? How did it lead to a positive outcome? Were any of the strategies that I listed today strategies that you implemented? Or are there ones that I shared that you wish you would have, and when you approach something in the future, you want to make note of? I really want these episodes to help people to see that resilience as a leader is crucial. We didn't talk about leading teams today and resilience in the workplace. I specifically wanted to focus on your own resilience, just you as a person, and talk about leading yourself first before we branch out to the other aspects of resilience. So that's why I'm just focused on the everyday leader. And I hope that through the stories I shared with you today, maybe some of them were relatable for you. Maybe it has been a health complication. Maybe it's financial struggle. Maybe it's the loss of a loved one, going through divorce, whatever it is. That's just the beginning, but I'm not defined by any of those. And I would like to think, actually, I know that had I not gone through all 5 things that I shared with you today, I would not be as strong as I am today. I am actually grateful for all the things that have happened to me. I feel that they have led me to where I am today, sitting here talking to you and being able to share my stories with you. And I only share them because I want you to know that, some people think Sierra seems to have it all together. I've had people say that before. Sierra, you just have it all together. No, I don't actually. I struggle with the same things that everyone else does. And I value being able to share my stories and hope that my lessons are able to influence other people and impact their lives. And if other people want to, reach out and share a challenge that you've overcome and how you've built resilience throughout your life, I'd love to hear that too. I do want to hear from the listeners. So please let me know what practices I shared today work for you, those you might try out. I encourage you to share this episode with maybe someone that's going through a difficult time right now. Maybe one of these strategies would help them. It doesn't matter. Share it with anyone that you think would feel that there is value in what I discussed today. I do want to express my gratitude for you staying for this entire episode. If you've made it to this point, I appreciate you taking time out of your day to add value to yourself. And I encourage you to subscribe so you get notifications when new episodes come out. I do want to leave you with a final thought. I have a quote that I love that comes, it goes right along with resilience. And it's by Steve Maraboli. And he says, life doesn't get easier or more forgiving. We just get stronger and more resilient. So it's not that life is getting easier. It's every single one of these situations that I've gone through, I have learned something from. It has made me stronger. I'm more resilient. And so when I face that next obstacle, when there is adversity, I feel like I have tools in my toolkit to overcome it more easily than I have in the past. So just a final reminder, engage in that branching out challenge. Share this with your friends. These episodes will always come out first on Spotify at noon Eastern Standard Time on Fridays, and then you can find them on all of the other platforms on Saturdays. So be sure to check them out, and I look forward to talking to you soon. Keep on branching out.